In the vastness of Indonesia, time seems to flow through the trees like an ancient whisper. In regions where no calendar reaches and where roads have never arrived, live entire communities that have not bent to the impositions of the modern world. There, the border between past and present is not marked by walls or maps, but by the sound of a forgotten language, by the rhythm of footsteps in the mud, by the absence of hurry. These are places where civilization never shouted loud enough to silence the gods of the forest. Beyond the reach of satellites and trade routes, they continue in silence, not out of ignorance, but by choice. There is something sacred in permanence, something almost offensive to the accelerated gaze of those who only understand value through progress. But here, each generation bows to the grandfather's knowledge, and every decision is made as if the spirit of the land were still watching. In this subtle space, where time refuses to be counted, begins the story of the forgotten. Tribes of Indonesia. It is not uncommon for the names of these tribes not to even appear in official records. Many of them do not even have a word for country or nation, as their identity does not fit within borders. Their maps are made of rivers, winds, and memories. They navigate by stories told around the fire, where each myth carries more truth than any manual. Here, knowledge is not in books, but in the hands that know where to find the right route, in the voice that recognizes the song of birds, in the silence that precedes the rain. In their cultures, wisdom is not an accumulation, but a living inheritance, passed from one gaze to another, shaped by the land, by cycles, and by absences. They are peoples who do not need writing to record history, because life itself, in its ritual repetition, is the book that opens each morning. What the world forgot. To look at, they chose to remember. Among these tribes, the land is not a resource. It is a presence, a being that observes, responds, and demands. Every step is taken with care, not out of fear, but out of respect. They know where not to cut, when not to harvest, and what should not be touched, even if it seems abundant. The forest speaks, and they listen, not out of superstition, but out of deep coexistence. Their beliefs are not just faith. They are pacts with the landscape. Hunting is not a sport. It is a dialogue. Harvesting is not a gain. It is a reciprocation. Every ritual, every gesture, every chant repeated at dawn is an attempt to maintain the invisible balance between the human and the non-human. And perhaps this is what makes them so distant from the outside world, not their technology, but their language. Because while the modern world speaks of conquests, they still converse with the land, and in it, they find meaning. When the sun sets and the fire rises, bodies begin to dance as if guided by a memory that cannot be translated. The rituals of these tribes do not serve merely to celebrate or ask. They are ways of remembering who they are, where they came from, and why they still resist. Each drumbeat is a step against erasure. Each body painting is a silent declaration of belonging. In a world where everything must be fast and useful, these peoples allow themselves repetition, mystery, the long time of spirits. In these moments, the past is not a distant memory, but a real presence, invoked by ancient gestures and words that only make sense to those born there. There are no tourists, no spectators. There is only life in its purest state, defending its own continuity. The ritual is their weapon against forgetting, and their prayer for permanence. Even far from the cities, the tribes feel the weight of what happens beyond the forest. The noise comes not from machines, but from the silent approach of interests that do not ask for permission. Foreigners arrive with promises and agreements that few there can understand. Community leaders are pressured to accept roads, schools, churches, projects that do not ask, but impose. And with that come diseases, packaged foods, the loss of language, the displaced laughter of children, who no longer know to whom they belong. Everything happens slowly, like a river changing its course without alarm. The enemy does not carry weapons, but contracts. And when the forest begins to be cut down, it is not just the wood that is lost. It is the names of the plants, the myths of the animals, the songs of the grandmothers. Modern colonization does not shout, but silences. And few hear these silences before they become permanent. Resistance, however, does not rise up in screams or spears. It hides in the gaze of the elders, who watch the young exchanging the bough for metal tools brought from afar. It is heard in the silence of the women, who now cook in aluminum pots, whose shine outshines the clay molded by generations. The new order does not arrive like a storm, but like a fine drizzle that soaks the earth slowly, until the deepest roots begin to rot, without anyone noticing the exact moment of collapse. Progress offers shortcuts, and shortcuts are seductive. Why wait for the right moon to plant, if chemical fertilizer promises immediate abundance? Why listen to the stories of the ancestors, if a cell phone screen offers worlds that flash in vibrant colors? Each choice seems small, harmless, but their accumulation is a slow poison. The forest, which was once home and temple, begins to be seen as an obstacle. And time, which was a sacred river, transforms into an enemy to be conquered dot. And so, the pact with the land begins to fray, not with a tear, but with a single thread pulled loose. It is pulled by a young man who, unlike his father, no longer asks the forest for permission. He carries an axe with a foreign gleam and sees not a sacred grove, but timber that can be traded for a motor to power his canoe. He fells a tree that has guided generations of hunters, its shadow a silent compass on the forest floor. The elders watch from a distance, their faces like carved stone, saying nothing. Their silence is heavier than any protest. They know the young man has not just cut down a tree. He has created a void in their shared memory, a place where a story used to live. He calls it progress, a faster way to the river. They see it as a wound, a new silence in a world already fading. And in this act, a new fear is born, not of the spirits of the forest, but of the emptiness their own children are choosing to create in their place. That night, the fire feels colder. The stories told around it falter, missing the landmark of fall. The fallen tree, a silent character in their tales. And then a new sound arrives. It is not the cry of a night bird or the rustle of leaves, but the harsh, impatient sputter of the motor. It rips through the tapestry of the evening, a noise that demands attention and offers nothing in return. The young man pilots his canoe, his face lit by a satisfaction the elders cannot comprehend. He glides over the water at a speed that blurs the riverbanks, turning sacred bends and watchful rocks into a meaningless landscape. He travels not with the river, but against it, conquering its flow. He does not see the fish startled into hiding, or hear the songs of the water that the slow rhythm of the paddle once revealed. He hears only his own power, a mechanical heartbeat drowning out the pulse of the earth. The old language of the river, spoken in currents and eddies, is being replaced by a single, brutal word: speed. That night, the fire feels colder. The stories, told around it, and with speed comes a new kind of cargo. The young man returns not just faster, but heavier with things the forest has never seen. He brings back salt in plastic bags, sugar in bright boxes, and sweets wrapped in crackling, colorful skins that do not rot. These objects possess a strange magic. The children, who once made dolls from woven leaves and stones, now clamor for the empty, shiny wrappers. They wear them as bracelets, fleeting treasures that carry no story, no memory of the hands that made them. A subtle trade begins within the tribe itself. A piece of this new sweetness for a well-made arrowhead. A colorful plastic bottle for a basket that took days to weave. The old economy of skill and meaning starts to compete with a new economy of novelty and want. The elders watch as the children learn a new game, one of having and not having. They see that these foreign goods do not nourish. They create an appetite for more, a hunger for things that are born of nothing and will return to nothing. Falter, missing the landmark of the fallen tree, a silent character in their tailies. And then, a new sound arrives. It is not the cry of a night bird or the rustle of leaves, but the harsh, impatient sputter of the motor. It rips through the tapestry of the evening, a noise that demands attention and offers nothing in return. The young man pilots his canoe, his face lit by a satisfaction the elders cannot comprehend. He glides over the water at a speed that blurs the riverbanks, turning sacred bends and watchful rocks into a meaningless landscape. He travels not with the river, but against it, conquering its flow. He does not see the fish startled into hiding, or hear the songs of the water that the slow rhythm of the paddle once revealed. He hears only his own power, a mechanical heartbeat drowning out the pulse of the earth. The old language of the river, spoken in currents and eddies, is being replaced by a single, brutal word. Speed dot, so the story of the forgotten tribes does not end with a final battle, for their enemy was never a tangible thing. It ends in the quiet spaces where things used to be. It ends when the fire is no longer lit to share stories, but only for the brief warmth it provides. It ends when the children's laughter no longer mimics the calls of birds, but the jingles of advertisements they half remember from a trader's radio. The elders finally fall silent, their memories turning to dust within them. For what is knowledge without a vessel to receive it? The forest does not reclaim them. It simply watches as they become strangers on their own land. And the river, once their map of the world, now carries only the reflection of a sky empty of their gods. The whisper that once flowed through the trees has faded. There is only the wind, blowing over a place that has forgotten its own name, leaving behind the most complete silence of all, the silence of the story that is finally over.